maybe it's a good time to talk about what happened in episode 1 of Critical Role Campaign 3.
Ooh,
You wanna kick
yeah,
us off?
yeah. Let's do it. So, this will be
Yeah,
our.
and let me
No,
turn
you're fine.
to my notes here because I was taking a bunch of notes. I think you were taking a bunch of notes. But yeah, so take it away, my man.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, because we will be cutting this out and putting this on YouTube. Hello, YouTube. We are the Pixelists. That's Blake. I'm Will, and we've got your Critical Role Campaign 3 Episode 1 recap here for you. So, let's see. To start, all right. So, the episode opens with as the past campaigns have as well, with Matt basically staring us in the eye, peering straight into my soul, and basically giving a monologue about just Marquette and
Yeah.
Exandria, but more specifically Marquette, and just setting up basically the location in which we find ourselves, not only for the campaign at whole, but also like the more specific location,
Yeah.
which I will get to. But I gotta
My
say that. Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say my wife, by the way, during that opening, she was like, it was kind of we were just silent listening, and she goes, "Wow, he's pretty good." She's never seen him DM
Yeah,
before. She's
yeah,
like, "Wow, he's really
he's
good."
incredible. Which
But
which
anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're fine. Which that's actually a perfect segue as to what I was gonna say is that Matt does a better job than I ever could, and so I don't want to just sit here and word for word repeat what he said because he gives like a 5 minute like basically opening
Mhm.
preface to the campaign, and so I would highly recommend that you just go check out that VOD. It's the very beginning. It'll just take a couple minutes, and you can get a much vivid better picture painted than
Right.
I could, but I will try to, still give the condensed version here. And essentially, we are in Marquette, and it is the year 843 PD, which stands for post divergence. And just for reference, this means it's about a year after the events of Exandria Unlimited, give or take, and about 7 years after the events of Campaign 2. Um, so our
Good to
story
know. Okay.
begins in the Serpent Wind Peaks, which is these big mountains that are strewn basically amongst this like lush jungle forest area called the Odrian Wilds. And you guys will have to forgive me on some of the pronunciations once we get deeper into the campaign. Hopefully, I'll learn them. So
It'll be commonplace at that
bear
point.
with me. Yeah.
If
Uh,
Laura Bailey can't remember Lord Esteros, I think it's okay if we forget
exactly.
how to pronounce a couple of these things. That's
So
later in the episode. Spoiler.
Oh,
Sorry.
shoot. But so there's numerous towns kind of scattered in this area. When I believe it's called the Honored Trails, and 5 of these tower-like mountains basically spew out of this forest among above all the rest, and they have been carved to basically house these streets and urban districts and everything, basically forming this massive singular city connected by bridges and cables and just all sorts of like canopy-esque accoutrement. And this is known as the capital city Drusar, home to the Shandai Quorum, again
Yep, that's right.
pronunciation,
Yeah, you nailed it.
um, and that which oversees and controls the larger populace. So we pick up within one of these cable cars, kind of traveling between this mountainous city. And inside, we meet our first 2 characters. We have Imogen, who is a young human sorcerer with like long, light purple hair and a thick Southern accent,
Great.
played by the one and only Laura Bailey. And we have Laudna, who is also young but a bit older than Imogen, and she's got dark hair and is kind of very like macabre and kind of got like a gothic vibe a little bit.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah.
And she's got black hair with a streak of white, and I think they mentioned she has a belt with like a dead rat on it and like a
Yeah.
a
I think
bird skull.
that's right. Yeah. Yeah. Very wholesome.
Yeah, yeah. And so the
Great for your
two
children.
the two of them are in this, cable car, and we find out that they've been here for a couple weeks, and they have come to the city because Imogen is wanting to access some books, some knowledge, some research that she is trying to find. And there are a couple places here that have a vast libraries and stuff. One of which is the Starpoint Conservatory, which is where they're currently headed. Because if you are not a student of these
Universities.
universities, yeah, thank you. then you have to request like special permission to be able to access it. So she did just that, but they haven't heard back, and so they decided to go and check and see if there's any news. So they arrive at this conservatory, go in, and there's a lady there that they speak to. And long story short, she's like, can I access this information? And she's like, let me go check. She comes back with a letter, and unfortunately, they are denying her access to the information. And so they're like, what can we do? And she's basically like, you need this written permission from someone from the quorum or someone from the Guro Courtier. Ugh, pronunciation. Um,
Yeah, I wrote Kotri. I don't remember what that was
oh
from.
yeah, a coder. Yeah, I think you're saying it right.
It's Kotri
Um,
or Kotri to speak on your behalf.
and so they're like, okay, how do we do this? And they're like, you got to get in with one of them, and they get permission. So they kind of leave tail between their legs, having not got what they came for, but now they're on a new quest to kind of, gain some recognition so that they can, earn this entry to these libraries. So they decide to leave, and they're like, let's, hit the market before we head home. And that's kind of the end of that scene. And now we cut over to a new place now known as the Crook House, which is like this destitute, kind of like underground vibe, kind of like for the outcasts of the society. It seems like hovel, as it were, but it's actually like quite colorful and fun inside. Like there's beads and different things strewn about. Um, and that made it actually sound to be pretty big, saying it contained like a multitude of ladders and rafters and ropes and tunnels. So it was this really cool, like underground network of outcasts,
Mm,
seemingly. And we're introduced here to Ashton, uh, Talison's character, which, by the way, I don't remember if I said this. Laudna is Marisha Ray's character, so forgive me
right.
if I didn't mention
Yeah.
that. So here we're introduced to Ashton, who is an Earth Genasi barbarian, and he's so cool. He's got like this injury on his head that is like we don't really know what happened, but it's got like this cracked veneer that like goes down his arm, and he said it was looked like it had been like filled in with gold or something. And he's got a jacket that says "just don't" on it, and a big mace that says "fuck off."
Hmm.
And he's kind of getting over a hangover as he's waking up, and runs down to get some food. A gentleman, which I assume is his friend, a non-binary human, I think, named Milo. Um,
I
and he
got the
bit,
impression he was like the steward of the house, maybe even the person who
yeah,
owns the house.
yeah,
But
me too. I think you're
anyway,
correct.
keep going.
So he's cooking up, and Ashton basically asks, "Hey, have you seen fresh cut grass?" And basically, cue Sam Riegel's character entering the scene, which is a small automaton robot called Fresh Cut Grass, aka FCG for short. And he's called that because he's got this symbol on his chest that looks like blades of grass. And we actually learn a little bit more about why he's called that later too. Um, but they talk a little bit, and we find out that they've been kind of traveling together for a few weeks, and they decide that they need to get out and look for some work because they don't have any money.
Mhm.
So,
Very wholesome character, by the way.
yes,
Yeah,
he's
he's basically Ted Lasso. Like
yes, I
let's
was
just.
gonna say that to you. That's exactly who he is.
I'm on episode 2, so I immediately had to use the reference. So
Nice.
anyway, that's a different conversation.
Yeah, but 100% agree. Very wholesome. And so they leave the Crook House and are off to go find some money. They ultimately decide to head to this inn named the Spire by Fire, and which rhymes. And Ashton walks up and goes and talks to the bartender and is like, "Hey, you got any work for me?" And unfortunately, the bartender tells him that don't really have anything that suits your particular skill set. But he gets a real kick out of fresh cut grass, whom eats a few pieces of copper because he's a robot and that's what he eats instead of food. And the bartender just loves that and is like, "Hey, you could entertain people around here and make some money, but Ashton, I don't have anything for you." And we also learn kind of a little bit about fresh cut grass here is that like he's just like we just mentioned, Ted Lasso, very wholesome. His goal in life is just to find people and kind of help them find their purpose, their fulfillment. their happiness. He thinks there's a lot of broken people out there, and he just wants to help them, which is kind
Yeah,
of
and
enlightening for why he's paired up with Ashton, who seems to be a little, rougher around the edges.
yeah, and it's nice. The barkeep is like, after he says this, he's like, "All right, now you've made it weird."
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, very very wholesome for sure.
Yeah, and so that's kind of the end of that scene. And again, we cut um over to huge surprise moment. Freaking EXU people show up. We've got Orem, Dorian, and Fern arriving to Drusar by skyship, having chartered one on their quest given to them by Keyleth, the voice of the Tempest. And that has brought them here. So we've got Fern, played by Ashley Johnson, who is this fawn druid with long green hair. She's like covered in flowers and mushrooms and like little jewelry and baubles. And she's got a little flaming monkey on her shoulder named Mister. We have Orem, played by Liam O'Brien, who is a halfling fighter, and he's got like short blonde hair, wearing like simple leather armor, and he's got himself a very fancy shield and a nice sword, and a sleeve tattoo that crawls all the way up his arm and is crowned by the two moons of Exandria. Um, and then finally we have Dorian, who is played by Robbie Damon, surprise addition to the cast, whom is a traveling bard, Air Genasi, blue skin, wearing nice clothes, very clean, well kempt, well manicured. Um, and it's revealed that they are here on a mission to find a man. Um, we don't know who yet, but they mentioned that this city is huge and we have to find one man. This like might be tough. So they decide to take the night to kind of decompress from their travel, get some food, get some sleep, and then really start their quest in the morning. Dorian, who has been here before, warns them, hey, be careful. I got pickpocketed last time I was here, so watch your back. And basically, as he's saying this, Fern pickpockets Pakidon, which pronunciation, I hope, which is like
Right.
a large, like elephant type creature, and she steals his earring from him, uh, which Orem and Dorian immediately scold her for this and are like, this trouble is going to catch up to you. Like, you can't keep doing this. And she's like, oh, you said it was easy to steal here, so I did. um, so they scold her for that, and then they're like, okay, yeah, let's go get some food and rest. And Dorian, having been here before, suggests the Spire by Fire. And
Right.
so they head that way. And then it picks back up with Imogen and Laudna again, when all of a sudden this wayward cart comes crashing down the alleyway and causing a ruckus. And you want to take it from there?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think Matt did such a great job describing like this moment. Like there's this they've just gotten their groceries and they're walking essentially by the Spire by Fire and hear this low boom hum, and this cart has this big glowing orb of blue energy that's there for just a second and then it disappears and it basically shatters this carriage. And all of the things it's carrying go scattering across the road. And immediately as this is happening, some of the items in the carriage actually begin to animate and they look pretty menacing. And so Laudna and Imogen are like right there, like, are you seeing this? Like, what's going on here? And also, it's actually right in front of the tavern. Fresh cut grass and Ashton are like, "What's going on out there?" And Fresh cut grass is like, "Is it a party?" And Ashton's like, "Yeah, let's go." So he rushes out, or excuse me, they rush out, and basically they arrive also at the same time that Dorian, Fern, and Orem are also arriving. So everyone's arriving at the exact same moment. And essentially, the things that animate are a sword, a kitchen knife, a rug, a broom, and a large table. And this is the first initiative of the campaign. And
Ooh.
so they begin to fight it. Um, it's a pretty typical battle. There's a couple of really cool details that give you a little bit of insight on the character's subclass. Uh, Laudna does something called form of the dead or form of dread. I'm not sure. I think it's form of the dead.
Yeah, I think
And
so.
somehow related to her warlock subclass. but it transforms her into this really ghastly. I think she even describes like a veil coming over her face as her bones kind of pop, and she like stretches and becomes like this ghastly figure. Um, and then Ashton they do like this interesting, they mention like this gravity energy that they're doing. And it seems to pull the animated objects towards them. And they also mentioned doing this thing called like chaos burst, I think, or chaos blast. Actually, I wrote it down, chaos burst, which I did a Google. I had no idea what it was and couldn't find anything either. So I guess it's a bit of a homebrew thing. And the other thing that might be a homebrew detail is Fresh Cut Grass does something called sympathetic link, which allows him, when someone takes damage, he takes half of the damage.
Yeah.
But you have a pretty.
Sorry. They
Go
actually
ahead.
are both homebrew. Matt tweeted about it
Okay,
a
great.
little bit earlier today.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so we get a little bit of homebrew flavor in this battle, but pretty typical battle. It's fun seeing them all, start to show some of the flair of their characters, and we finally get Travis's character rushing out, a man that he describes in his late 70s, early 80s, with I believe, a cane and a rapier, and rushes out and says, "For Dressar," and begins to battle. I don't know. So they battle. They end up defeating these random objects. And after the fight's over, Travis's character, who introduces himself as Sir Bertrand Bell, a level 5 fighter, basically says, "Hey, you guys were pretty awesome. Are y'all looking for more work?" And Laudna says, "Well, we're not really looking for money," speaking for herself and Imogen, "but like, would this help us get enough esteem, like doing more work, where maybe the Starpoint Conservatory would let us in?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, of course. In fact, I actually I sponsor a portion of their library." And Bertrand Bell makes several comments like this, by the way, that makes him seem like essentially a very key figure in Dressar. And this is an important detail because actually he mentions they go inside, they have this conversation, and he actually mentions there's a philanthropist, a very important person in the core spire, which the core spire is this central spire. There's 5 spires that comprise Dressar. And in the core spire, there's a philanthropist, full on a philanthropist who goes by the name of Lord Esteros. And we joked earlier that some of the cast were like, "What's the name again?" And it's like Lord Esteros. And sort of has this ambition to help as many people as possible. And Bertrand Bell is, they joke, is sort of like a talent agent whose job is to go out and find great potential hires who could come do tasks that would essentially be similar to what they just did. They would basically need to bring some muscle and solve maybe some precarious problems. So Ashton and Fresh Cut Grass are really motivated by the idea of making some money. Orem, Fern, and Dorian. Orem is interested and has this intuition. He calls it this itch at the back of his brain that maybe they should do something like this, even though it's a bit of a segue from their main mission. And Laudna and Imogen are like, "Yeah, let's do it. This is going to get us the clout we need to get into the Starpoint Conservatory." So they agree to meet the next morning. That night, as a sort of killing time, Orem actually goes over to Bertrand Bell's room, knocks on the door, and Bertrand Bell is sound asleep in his chair. And he's like, "Oh, is it morning?" And he's like, "No, it's 7:30. Like, we just spoke." Like, and he's like, "Who are you?" And he's like, "We just spoke half an hour ago." But he asks him, "Hey, since you seem to know everyone here," and he's like, "Oh yeah, of course I know everybody." He asks, "Do you know a Boshad Brezio?" And then also asks, "Do you know someone who calls themselves the Anger?" To both of which Bertrand Bell's like, I have no idea who either of those people are. But Lord Esteros, maybe he'll know. Simultaneously, Laudna and Imogen are going back to where they're staying, which is this neighborhood called, I think, the Windowed Whale, or the Well, Windowed something.
I think
and
Windowed Wall, maybe?
Windowed Wall, it makes sense. And it is this sprawling neighborhood. They're staying in this woman's house who basically is a widow. Her late husband passed away a long time ago, and now she's sort of like an innkeeper, I guess, or an Airbnb or whatever. And once they're in there, they ask about Lord Esteros, and the woman mentions, oh, yes, Lord Esteros, years ago, he took over the estate of a woman who basically died, and he like moved in and bought her place. But that's the only detail that we get. And then back at the tavern at the Spire by Fire, Ashton decides that they're going to play cards with the bouncer and another person down in the bar. Fresh Cut Grass keeps a lookout and decides that whoever gets the drunkest and is in the need of most help, he's going to donate his room to that person, and actually does so. And then Fern decides with Dorian to just enjoy the environment a little bit. And so Dorian decides to play his lyre, and it's pretty much a total train wreck. But he eventually wins back the crowd thanks to Fern being like, oh my gosh, it's Dorian Storm, which helps a little bit. And then Fern actually tries to help Ashton win his card game that he's bought into with the Pacadon, who he's playing against. And unfortunately, Ashton eventually loses.
He loses a lot.
Yeah, loses a lot of money, actually. All that to say, the night passes. Ashton does check the detail of Fern trying to give him a hand and just makes a mental note and says, like, that surprises me. That's interesting. And then there's one other big detail, actually, before the party had split. They actually are getting to know each other a bit. And Fresh Cut Grass mentions that he first came across Ashton, or rather, Ashton came across him when him being Fresh Cut Grass was in a silver mine on a mission in a nearby town with a bunch of his friends, and they were basically all murdered except for him. He describes that he was in stasis mode, and then Ashton came along a few days later and found him and was like, yeah, all your friends are dead. Also mentions that he's named after he keeps calling them his associate, not like his creator, but an associate who goes by the name of Dancer, who has created similar friends like him that are all after her favorite smells, I think is what they had said.
Yeah.
And other than that, he now has, after he basically woke up and found all of his friends are dead, he collected some certain key parts of their bodies, like a saw blade, I guess, to remember them by. I'm not really quite sure, but he's now has like an amalgamation of different things from them.
Yeah, I think it's so he can like do different stuff, like he could maybe attach the saw blade and like do damage or.
Yeah. Just so this isn't getting too long-winded, getting to the point, the next morning they're heading off to Lord Esteros's place, and again, Bertrand Bell is making all these comments, like I think Dorian even asked, like, is he expecting us? And he's like, oh yes, of course, like really hams up the fact that he's Lord Esteros's go-to guy. They get there, the person who comes to the door, the servant, is like, what's going on? Like,
who are you?
Oh, yeah. And it kind of has to, Belle has to sort of jog his memory, or jog her memory. And she's like, oh, okay. Basically says, the Lord will see you. They go into this place. It is notably very dim. They mentioned Matt Mercer mentions there's almost no like natural light in this place. And they're led to this dark room with the crackling fire, a study where this older orc who pretty clearly he's bald and pretty clearly is on the tail end of his life, but still maintains this power and presence about himself.
Silver Fox.
Yeah, announces himself as Lord Esteros and basically is like, what are you doing here, Bertrand? And it's pretty clear that Bertrand and him had engaged in something a few months ago, and then Lord Esteros was not expecting to see him again.
Yeah.
Or certainly wasn't like this sort of deal that Bertrand described to the rest of the group. So Lord Esteros to the rest of the group is like, who are you guys? What do you want? And Fern, in typical Fern fashion, is like, what do I want out of life? Or like, what do I want? It's kind of a funny comment, but Lord Esteros is really annoyed by this and is like, Bertrand, you've totally you're an idiot. Like, you've wasted my time. And Bertrand's like, no, they want to work for you. They're great. They're great potential hires. And Lord Esteros says, really? Well, if that's true, prove it. And stands up and charges at the group. And that's where the episode ends. And that is what happened in episode 1 of campaign 3.
Yeah. Number 1 in the books, baby.
We did it.
We did it.
And yeah, I mean, I almost don't know where to start with this episode, other than the fact that I enjoyed pretty much every single detail of it.
Yeah, and again, if you are on YouTube watching this recap, the video's ending here. But if you're interested in Blake and I's thoughts, our discussion, and everything, we'll do a link down to the full video below. So feel
Yep.
free to check that out. But yeah.